Hello and welcome back to our Bible study called The Cross-Shattered Christ. My name is Erin and I'm one of the pastors here at Covenant Community Church. And we're excited to be offering this 6-week study as we work through The Cross-Shattered Christ by Stanley Hauerwas. We're glad that you've joined us, whether you're joining us as an individual or a small group, or whether you've gathered family and friends together for a watch party of sorts. Our task is to spend a total of 6 weeks working through the words of Jesus that were spoken from the cross, and we're going to do so in partnership with Professor Stanley Hauerwas, author of many books, Professor Emeritus at Duke University, and an inspirational voice for our reflections through this Lenten season, and particularly through the book, The Cross-Shattered Christ. He'll be joining us as well for a Zoom interview, and so that will be woven into our work. And so our methodology is a combination of video clips, of scripture reading, and of personal and group reflection. I want to say thank you to those that offered feedback from session 1. Because of your input, we are adding some of the artwork that's from the book for your reflection and meditation with your group. And we're also going to provide a theological cheat sheet. So when there's theological terms that come up or concepts that your group might want to explore further or at a later date, you'll be able to do so. With all that said, let's get the conversation going for this week. Last week, we explored the concept of mystery, of death, and our tendency to kind of be deniers of death. And we also landed in the area of talking about forgiveness, since that's what the phrase from the cross was centered around. But today, we're going to move more into the area of silence and certainty and paradise. Dr. Hauerwas writes in his book, "The silence surrounding Jesus' words on the cross annoy and threaten us. Engulfed by this death-determined silence, we find these words too enigmatic. In other words, too hard to understand." We're going to try to deepen our understanding about the phrase about surrounding paradise in just a few moments. But before we do, I want us to think about the silence in our own lives. Sometimes a partner gives us the silent treatment. Sometimes we're looking for answers from agencies and organizations, and we make phone calls and send emails, and silence is what we're greeted with. Nobody responds, nobody engages. Sometimes we choose silence to combat the stimulation of our lives. We just need a moment. And other times we use silence as a way to show honor or respect, such as when we take a moment of silence for somebody that is lost or a fallen war hero or something like that. I want to invite you to just take a few moments with your group to start with this opening question. And that is, what is it about silence that is annoying or threatening for our lives? What is it about silence that is annoying or threatening for our lives? Take about 5 or 6 minutes to do that together as a group, and then we'll come back together and dig in a little bit deeper into tonight's topic. Well, welcome back. I hope that you didn't give each other the silent treatment while you had the opportunity to share in discussion, and hopefully together you found some good insights about why silence is annoying or threatening in our lives. You know, in some ways, today's word from the cross appears to kind of ease some of the silence, to ease some of the mystery about God and about the nature of death and forgiveness, because it isn't completely silent. Jesus offers not only words, but words that kind of give us some answers or some insights when he offers this statement, "Truly I tell you, today you will be with me in paradise." And yet, that statement, "Truly I tell you today, you will be with me in paradise," that does not quite satisfy our curiosity about God and many other things. There's still space for a lot of questions to come up. There's a fair amount of space for our imaginations to run wild about the context of this story, about what's happening and what's unfolding. And so for a few moments tonight, we actually want to invite you to read the story of Jesus in the context of the thieves that were also being crucified on either side of him. And together as a group, to take a few moments and to explore what is left unsaid. What is it that's unclear in this declaration from Jesus? In other words, what questions does this particular part of Jesus' crucifixion story raise for you? It could be questions about God. It could be questions about forgiveness, the afterlife. It could really be questions about anything, modern day, ancient, you name it. We want to welcome the questions that kind of come up when you just deal with that one little section of the story and Jesus saying, "Truly, I tell you, today you will be with me in paradise." And the second thing that we want to invite you to do, either in your own reflections in your journal or there with your group, is to also note the conclusions that you're tempted to draw. Conclusions again, right, wrong, indifferent about God, life, forgiveness, humanity, you name it. What are the conclusions that you're tempted to draw as you read the story of Jesus in the context of these thieves? For those who are willing, we'd love to collect your questions and we'd love to collect your conclusions about the things that are coming up in the story. And we're going to do that just by having you text it to our church texting feature. That's 828-900-2045. So if you want to pick one person, or if it's just you and you want to send straight to that number, we know that the questions that come into us here are going to be the questions connected to this study or the conclusions that you're drawing as you read this particular verse of scripture. That would be really fun for us to be able to use in another format on another day. If not, that's fine. Just enjoy each other. But what questions does the story raise? And what conclusions are you tempted to draw about God, life, humanity, all the things when you read this story? Don't spend too much time discussing, or especially don't spend too much time debating what you come up with. Just gather those questions and conclusions, and we'll be back together in just a few moments. Hey, thanks so much for taking the time to read the story of Jesus between those two criminals being crucified on either side of him. I would encourage you to just sort of look back over your list, whether you're doing that alone or with somebody else tonight, or when you have additional time, whatever makes sense for you. But look back over those lists and look for evidence of what Hauerwas described last week as narcissistic reading of the text, or a narcissistic way of engaging scripture. And Hauerwas cautioned us against that last week. And so exercises like this of reading and then writing out those questions and writing out those conclusions can help us to see more clearly and collectively how we are inclined and our tendency to read ourselves into the story that was then, right? We tend to read ourselves in rather than drawing out the implications of what are present in the story. Additionally, do that with your conclusions about God. If you have some statements where it's like, I think this teaches us X, Y, or Z about God, maybe spend some time thinking about where else in history that conclusion is supported, where else in the Christian tradition that conclusion is supported, what other resources and reasonable ways of undergirding that conclusion might come alive, and it'll help really determine if this is something that all of people for all of time have held about God, or if this is something that's sort of unique to you in your own time, in your own way. Because when there's limited information, Hauerwas talks in his book about how our imaginations just love to fill those gaps.
Welcome back, Professor. So good to have you with us again this week. This week we look at the second word, which is the word that has a little bit more of a story behind it. And that's kind of where you started. I think you addressed the fact that this is one of those words, truly, I tell you today, you will be with me in paradise, that leaves us craving for more. We want to fill in the gaps of the story and all of those things. And at one point that led you to say, and this is where I want to start us off today, you said Christians are tempted to say more about what we believe than we can or we should say. In the following section, you seem to connect that temptation to our modern flirting with certainty born in modernity. And that is inappropriate for a people who worship a crucified God. Could you say a little bit more about that? What is inappropriate about this modern flirting with certainty?
Is the exemplification of our craving to provide an explanation for that which cannot be explained, but only understood. In particular, what is engaged in Jesus' relationship to those two that are being crucified with him is the fact that he clearly has the authority to offer to one of them companionship that we so desperately long for in the world in which we find ourselves. I think one of the things I didn't do well in response to Jesus' declaration to the other crook who was being crucified, is how, even in crucifixion, he is about overcoming our loneliness. I think how Jesus, the second word, should be understood is how we have been given as Christians a way to live that overcomes isolation.
For those of us engaging this at home, in the midst of these various insights and ideas and takeaways from the text that we sort of come to, I find Hauerwas's conclusion to be really intriguing and somewhat unique. You heard Hauerwas say that some things can only be understood, but they cannot be actually known. These words about paradise are really a revelation of Jesus' authority, and ultimately that what Jesus is offering is companionship. And that Jesus' work on the cross, his words and his work, is a work that makes it possible for us to overcome isolation. I'm not sure if that's how you've thought about this exchange from the cross before, but I want to invite you as groups to sit with that a little bit, to unpack that a little bit further, knowing that companionship is the conclusion that Hauerwas reached. But for you all, when you hear the words paradise, what images and ideas have traditionally come to mind for you? What has shaped your understanding of what paradise is, or why someone would want to be connected to this idea or this concept of paradise? And the second question is, what is it about this idea of companionship that is encouraging or helpful or hopeful for you? And then share together about what might be challenging about that. How is that hard for you to engage or to uphold? Hi friends, I hope that you enjoyed the time to explore the possibilities about Jesus' words around paradise and assuring the thief that today you will be with me in paradise. Another part of this passage that's worth spending a few moments thinking through and wrestling through is the statement that is made by the thief before Jesus responds with that assurance of paradise. And that is when the thief says, "Jesus, remember me when you come into your kingdom." In his book, Hauerwas helps us to recognize the difference between how we would ask this question or how we would offer this statement, "Jesus, remember me when you come into your kingdom," versus the way that the thief asks it. And so when you and I in our 21st century selves ask to be remembered, usually what we mean is that we want to be thought of as important. We want to have a legacy. We want to be someone who is significant. And again, the story has a tendency to become about us. Jesus, remember me. Make me someone who mattered when you come into your kingdom. But when the thief asks for Jesus to remember, it's a story about Jesus. It's a way of articulating, as we mentioned a few moments ago, that the nature of Jesus' authority, that Jesus does have the authority, Jesus does have the ability, Jesus does have the capacity and the willingness to remember him. And there's this hope, what really is described as an eschatological hope, that comes in this idea that we can be remembered, in this image of literally being put back together. And so Sam actually shared a few more minutes with Hauerwas along this idea, and I want to share a portion of their conversation with you.
I want to jump to, Jesus's very particular statement of remembrance here, but do you think that remembrance is in part made possible by resolving the isolation issue? I mean, is that what's happening in that, or is there more? Because
I think they're connected.
You think they're connected? You talk a little bit. Maybe this is what you were saying here. You would hope you could have extended this. The way I read it, you talked about remembrance as something that connected back to this eschatological politic, this politic of hope, and you really dug into that, this hope that was developed out of that. Would you still live into that today? Do you think you would still want to emphasize that hope as much, or would you want to emphasize the isolation?
I would still emphasize the hope.
Yeah.
People are dying for it.
Yeah, it's this is just part of my story as it connects with it. You started talking about the remembrance as being remembered, kind of anchoring in that English um, use of that word. It pulls me back to all of my Pentecostal roots. Like I remember sermons very vividly of people talking about Jesus being pulled apart on the cross, and through that action being remembered back together. But I wonder, from your perspective, what is the remembered life? What does that look like? You talk about it in terms of the font and the table, but what does a remembered life that people are longing for look like to you?
Be claimed by another as a friend.
When Jesus says, "Today you will be with me in paradise," paradise is intricately connected to the remembrance that the thief longed for. And as you begin to draw your discussion and reflection to a close as a group tonight, I want to invite you to meditate on the image that comes to us from the book, a picture of paradise. You've already described some of your own ideas and images and understandings of what paradise looks like. We've already talked about companionship, but I just want to put the image before you of the embrace of two individuals, and to think about all the ways this image encapsulates tonight's conversation. Sit with it for a moment in silence, and when you're ready, if you are with other people, share together in a couple final questions. What is the remembered life? Hauerwas offers his idea of the remembered life, but for you and your own understanding of God and your own experience of this world, what is the remembered life? And what is it that you pray God remembers, puts back together, or makes connected and complete in you and in your life? We look forward to being together with you in our next session. Don't forget to close with sharing your thoughts and prayers with each other. And if you'd like to order the book, let us know. We can help you, or you can find The Cross-Shattered Christ on Amazon, and you could read along with us. We'll see you for the next session as we move on to the third word from the cross.